Okay, so today we are going to be learning our new chapter, which is chapter 9. And this also deals with fractions, but this time it's with operations. So when they say operations with fractions, what they mean, and you can think of all the different types of operations there are, there's addition, subtraction, division, multiplication. That's why I always say, which operation are we going to work with? So the first operation that we are going to work with, and honestly the easiest one, is addition. So this is chapter 9, lesson 2, and it is add like fractions. So that is the lesson that we are going to do. And when they say the word like, what they mean by like is that they have the same denominator. That's what they mean by like, meaning that they are similar and that they have the same denominator. So when you add like fractions, and then I'm going to put in parentheses here to tell you what like fractions mean. So like fractions means same denominators. You join fractions to the same whole. So you start off with two fractions and then you add them together to make one fraction. It won't always be a whole. Sometimes it will be a different numerator and different denominator, but they're just saying that you're going to add either maybe 1, 2, 3 fractions together in order to make one fraction. So then I'm going to go ahead and put a star here, and that means that this is the most important thing for the lesson. And this is, in order to add like fractions, I'm going to do this in steps. So your first step is add the numerators together. And then your second step is to keep the same denominator. So you're not adding those. You're going to keep it the same. Keep the same denominator. Then you will rewrite the new fraction that you got from adding. So you rewrite the new fraction. And then the fourth step, which is going to be in pretty much every instruction for your lesson and for your examples, is then check to see if the fraction is in its simplest form. And if you forgot what it means for the fraction to be in its simplest form, that's when the numerator and the denominator only share the factor of 1. So these are the 4 steps to adding like fractions. First, you add the numerators together. Easy enough. Then you keep the same denominator. Whatever the denominator is, they're going to be alike. You keep it the same. You don't do anything new to it. You don't add them. You keep it the same. Then you go ahead and rewrite the new fraction with the numerator that you added together. Then you put that same denominator. Then finally, you check to see if the fraction is in its simplest form. If it is, then you leave it alone and that's the final answer. If it's not in simplest form, then you do the 5th step, which is put in simplest form. If possible. So 5 steps to adding like fractions. The adding is the easiest part, but then remembering if it is in its simplest form. If you do not put the fraction in its simplest form, you will not get full credit for it because you did not follow all steps of the instructions. So let's go ahead and look at an example of adding like fractions. So this would be an example. It would be find the sum, and then it would say write in simplest form. This would be an example in the instructions that would given to you. So remember the sum, don't forget your vocab words. The sum is when you add two or more things together. In this case, we are adding fractions. So this is our example. It's going to be 3 over 10 plus 5 over 10. So let's go through our 5 steps together. So we are here to add like fractions. First step, you are going to add the numerators together. If I look here, 3 plus 5 equals 8. Easy enough. That is you adding the numerators together. Then you keep the same denominator. They both share the denominator of 10. This makes them like fractions because they share the same denominator. So then I keep this fraction with a denominator of 10. Then I rewrite the new fraction. So right here, I'm going to put my line, and then I'm going to put my denominator as 10 because that did not change. So here is my new fraction after I've added them. So this is adding the 2 fractions to make the new fraction. Now my 4th step is to check to see if the fraction is in its simplest form. The easiest way to find if the fraction is in its simplest form, just like our simplest form lesson, is to list out all the factors of 8 and 10. So that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to list out my factor pairs. In order to make 8, I have 1 and 8, and 2 and 4. Those are the factors of 8. Then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the denominator. So I have 1 and 10, and then I have 2 and 5. Well, if I look here to check to see if it is in simplest form, they share more than one factor other than 1, and that factor is 2. So the greatest common factor, remember this acronym, is 2. So when you have that, that means that you must divide the numerator and the denominator by 2 in order to put the fraction in its simplest form. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to do that right here. I'm going to rewrite my fraction 8 over 10. Move it up. And then I'm going to divide it by the greatest common factor, which is 2. So I do the numerator divided by 2 and the denominator by 2. 8 divided by 2 equals 4. 10 divided by 2 equals 5. So just to do a final check to see if it is in its simplest form, now I'm going to list off the factors of 4. So I have 1 and 4, 2 and 2. Those are all the factors that can give me 4. So then I do the same thing for 5. 1 and 5. Well, if you look here, the only factor that they have in common is 1. And whenever the only factor they share with the numerator and denominator is 1, that means that the fraction is in its simplest form. So then your final answer is 4 over 5. And that would be the sum of these fractions in simplest form. So make sure you go through the 5 steps when adding the like fractions. It's super easy just to add the numerators together and keep the same denominator. You can go through it very, very quickly. It's making sure that it's in its simplest form. That's where you have to put in more work. Remember, if you don't put it in its simplest form, you will not get full credit because that is not the final answer. So that is how you add like fractions.